All right, thank you for being with us again. Greetings, and thank you for joining us for our final episode of our series, Voices of Black Faith Freedom. I'm Charles Watson Jr., and I'm the Director of Education here at BJC. And I'm just blessed and happy to have my friend PJ Andrews with me today, who is the Race and Discourse Officer for the Baha'is of the United States. Thank you for joining us, PJ.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
All right, all right. So as always, when we do these conversations, we want you to follow us on Twitter and hashtag with the Black Faith Freedom Voices hashtag, and make sure you tag BJC on the Hill as you do that. So um, for a lot of people, PJ, they probably read this and said that the Baha'i faith. Wait a minute. One of the great things I've loved about working at BJC is actually working with the different faith communities and those that don't have a faith. And my work gave us an opportunity to meet each other. So what I want you to do for us first, man, please give us a brief history of the Baha'i faith and your connection to the faith tradition.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you, Charles, for the opportunity to be part of this series and celebrate Black History Month in this way by reflecting on the way in which the Black community in America thinks about religious freedom. And I'm very happy to be here to share a little bit of the Baha'i perspective from my own knowledge, from my own experience. One of the things I love about the Baha'i faith is that its fundamental principle, the principle that animates it, is the idea of oneness of God, that there's one God, that we all worship the same God, that religion is one, and that all of the messengers of God are united and not in conflict with each other, and that humanity is one, that really one of our greatest heritages as a human race is our interconnectedness, our oneness, that we are all creatures and creations of God. We all have a soul that comes from and returns to God. So this idea of oneness really, I think, is the center of this faith. And I can share a little bit more about the principles, but just about the history. It's one of the newest independent world religions. It's not a sect of any other religion. It's not an outgrowth. It's really an independent faith that started in 1844 in what was then the Persian Empire, now is Iran in modern day. And the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith is named Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah means the glory of God. It's a title, it's an Arabic word that as like a title, it means the glory of God. And so Baha'is are followers of Baha'u'llah, or followers of the glory of God. And the Baha'i faith is very new, but is actually quite diverse in its geographic range. So it's really, you can find Baha'i communities in every part of the world. And in fact, they're all, this idea of oneness, it's all part of the same Baha'i faith. There's not the American Baha'i community, the European Baha'i community, we're all united. Of course, recognizing the diversity of all of the cultures where they are from, but I think that unity is the foundation of it. And then I think this idea of oneness, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the principles. And one of the things that I really appreciate is that in the teachings of the Baha'i faith, this idea that we are on a journey from otherness to oneness, that humanity as a whole is in a collective process of maturation, of reaching spiritual maturity. And I think that that's really important at this particular moment in the history of the world, where we see so many crises, so much injustice, so much oppression, so much confusion. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of a strong and clear spiritual foundation, a collective one. And I think that, one of the teachings of the Baha'i faith is that we're moving towards a future of spiritual maturation. So I think, like, right now we see a lot of spiritual barbarism right now. So we're like spiritual barbarians. We haven't really developed the capacity to recognize our inherent oneness, to be able to really love each other and respect and honor each other's backgrounds and differences. And I think that that's, a result of prejudice and fear and ignorance. And I think, this piece of the Baha'i faith that's so important is to be able to achieve this sort of spiritual destiny, the spiritual maturation that reflects our interconnectedness, our unity, and our diversity. We have to really deal with this issue of prejudice and ignorance. And I think that's, really where the work is right now. And to just share briefly about my connection to the Baha'i faith,
Yeah.
is related to this. My grandfather is a Black immigrant from the Cape Verde Islands. He arrived here in 1926 to Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Mhm.
And he married another Cape Verdean who was white. Cape Verdeans are black, white, and everything in between. And so, they were an interracial couple in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and they met a Baha'i couple in Massachusetts, and that Baha'i couple, went out intentionally to befriend my grandparents. And it was through them that my father ultimately became a Baha'i. And that's how I've learned of the faith too. But I think, this principle, this legacy of the Baha'i faith is striving to rise above social divisions, to really connect with other people. And that's how the faith entered my family, the Baha'i faith entered my family.
Amen. Beautiful story, PJ, and also just thank you for taking us through and helping us understand a little bit more about the Baha'i faith and the oneness of it. And that oneness is very grand, and it encapsulates everybody here. It's not just for you; it's for everybody. But in a sense, it's still a minority religion in
Mhm.
America, right?
Oh yeah.
So how would you define faith freedom, and what does that mean for minority religions in America?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm glad you raised it. And the Baha'i community is is about 200,000 people in America. So it's very much a minority faith.
Right.
But when you ask this question of defining faith freedom for, the Baha'is as a minority faith, um, I think of this idea that we should all be lovers of the light, not the lamp from which the light emanates. And I say that because it connects to this really basic principle in the Baha'i faith, which is that every person must be free to investigate the truth and reality independently. And I think that this is a sort of fundamental principle of the Baha'i religion. And I think the reason why being able to independently investigate truth is so important is because it is the only means by which a recognition of our inherent interconnection can be honored. Because to independently investigate truth requires us to let go of all prejudices that we may hold, all of those sort of blind imitations that we just inherit from wherever we happen to be born, whatever social milieu we came from. There's certain assumptions about reality that aren't necessarily based in reality, aren't truth. They're more rooted in prejudice, and to be able to let those go, to really see um, unencumbered by prejudice, I think is a really important principle that we'll need in this ability to have faith freedom. But I wanted to also share a quote from the writings of Baha'u'llah that I think captures the Baha'i approach to this idea. And Baha'u'llah says that Baha'is should consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. And so I think it's really important that that's embodied in the life of a Baha'i, is to honor and respect the religious faiths and traditions of everyone, but not only to honor and respect them, but to be genuinely interested in what they are, where they come from, the source of it, and that people are able to really be that religion, to really honor the tradition of that faith. And I think, just to share one other idea on this point, um, is that Abdul Baha, who was the son of Baha'u'llah and was the head of the Baha'i faith for a number of years at the turn of the century, in the 20th century, he said, if religion becomes a cause of dislike, hatred, and division, it were better to be without it.
Mm.
And that all of the holy prophets were doctors to the soul. They gave prescriptions for the healing of mankind. Thus, any remedy that causes disease does not come from the great and supreme physician. So I think this idea that religion is really meant to bring us together is foundational. That the purpose of religion is to bring unity, concord, harmony. and stability and order to the world, to create, opportunities for well-being. And so I think, in terms of, this idea of faith freedom, really ensuring that people are able to do that in a way that honors the truth of their faith, and doesn't, and I think when we have the prejudice, it allows us to reinforce those walls of division and conflict, and then we, are trying to push each other down, push each other's faiths down, and not really recognize and honor them.
PJ, I couldn't do anything but smile when I was listening to the words there, because I might have to say my dad was of the Bahai faith. It reminds me of a story. My dad, one day, I don't know what we were doing. We were outside about to work, but I don't know what brought this conversation on. And my dad said, "Hey, for 5 seconds, there is no God." Right? I said, "Okay." He's like, "Doesn't it just feel good to treat people how you want to be treated? Doesn't it just feel good if somebody's hungry, give them something to eat? Doesn't it just feel good to do right by people?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Okay, now add God back into it. And if your God takes away from any of the stuff that you felt, then you need to change your God." It's like, wow. So it always gave me that interconnectedness that you're talking about here.
Yeah.
And so that also kind of talks about the faith freedom, because, you guys being a minority, 200,000 here, faith freedom has to, for me, come from protecting the minority first. Because if the minority is not protected, then they just get eaten up, and it just goes up the ladder, and eventually it's you. Just the principle of protecting the minority in any aspect, it is a beautiful thing. I don't think we should ever not do that with faith freedom. So I don't know if you want to carry on a little bit more about that.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. It reminded me. So in the Baha'i faith, there's an administrative order structure that forms it, that guides it, that holds it together, and there's every Baha'i community has something called a local spiritual assembly, and there's also national spiritual assemblies, and these are elected bodies of 9 people that are elected from all the believers in a locality. And in the Baha'i electoral process, if there's a tie and you need to tie break between like one of the people who are elected, the guidance of the Baha'i institutions, the head of the Baha'i faith, is that you should first see if there's a minority among those 2 people, and then if that's the case, that minority should automatically be elected. There's no questions about it. That's just sort of the default. That's like the first criteria of how you break a tie. And then there's just so much guidance in the Baha'i faith about really like having a spirit of welcome, honoring, and ennobling the minorities in a community, whatever the community happens to be, whatever the dominant population is, that the community and the institutions and the individuals in that community need to go above and beyond, out of their way, to ensure that the minority population within them are welcomed, are honored, are embraced, are elevated in any way that they, in a way that makes sense, because of the recognition that I think it's building out of the recognition of our history in America and globally, really, like as a humanity, to have fear, prejudice of, and lead to oppression of the other. And so built into the administration of the Baha'i faith is this intentional sort of flipping of that dynamic.
The power structure.
Yeah, exactly.
Not always leaning toward the power of it. PJ, we believe in separation of church and state, and we know that, but people don't have to check their faith at the door when we come about the government. But if we were to adapt some of the principles, I would take that principle into the government. Like when there's a tie, when you've tried to work everything out, there's a tie. Protect the minority first, and let's go with them, and then we'll go from there. I think that would help a lot of the problems that we have there. But so I want to also give you an opportunity to kind of give us, what do you think the biggest misunderstanding about the Baha'i faith is, or the faith tradition is? I know many people have never heard of it, so that might be the biggest misunderstanding. But what things have you come across that you think you would like to talk about so that people can get a better understanding and, one of the
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Actually, I think that you hit the nail on the head, which is that it exists at all. So I think just having an opportunity like this to share about the Baha'i faith with an audience is always a pleasure for me. And so I think one is just like movement out of obscurity. So that's like what you just said. I think that it's sort of that it is an independent religion. I think, in America, oftentimes people think it's like a sect of Islam, or but it really is, a beautiful independent faith with, Baha'u'llah was a manifestation of God that, emerged, established holy writings, sacred scriptures, laws, ordinances, revealed prayers, set a new calendar. Right now, the Baha'i world is getting ready to start on the Baha'i month of fasting. So there's 19 months in a Baha'i calendar, and the last month of the year is the month of fasting, of putting aside all aspects of the self and really reorienting your life as an expression of your love for God, and immersing yourself in the holy writings and prayer and meditation to really refresh and renew your spirit. And then it ends with what's called Nowruz, the Baha'i New Year, and it is coincides with the spring equinox, so the first day of spring, when the sun shines equally on all of the earth. Is the day that we start our new year and feel ready to, spiritually prepared for the year to come.
Wow.
So I think,
Wow.
a little bit of maybe people, yes, don't recognize it as an independent faith, or that it's sort of like, I think when you're in obscurity, people maybe think it's a cult.
Right.
In fact, when my dad became a Baha'i, my uncle was a military man. He was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and he said he had to go and do some covert ops and remove his brother from this cult, and ended up, really also falling in love with the Baha'i faith. He became a Baha'i himself, ironically,
Wow.
after that.
Wow. That's a
I
great
think,
story.
those are some of the things. I think also I just want to emphasize that, you know, uh, oftentimes people maybe think that the Baha'i faith is sort of like a kumbaya, pie in the sky, naively optimistic faith, because we talk about unity and oneness as a foundational principle. But I think, really, for me, it could be anything. But I find the Baha'i faith a true a faith where you express a religion where you express your faith in action. That the testament of your faith is your ability to, Baha'u'llah says, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. And so I think, when you look at the Baha'i community, first of all, it's a very open and welcoming community to anyone and everyone. There's no expectation that you become a Baha'i when you participate in Baha'i communities to be part of it. But that, Baha'is really are striving at the community level, at the neighborhood level, to really build unity and harmony in community, bring people together, and really transcend the bonds that divide us. So yes, I think maybe it's not a fantasy religion. It's a very grounded religion that strives to live its beliefs and practice.
Okay. So with previous weeks when we've done this series and as Black Faith Freedoms for Faith Voices for a reason, and we wanted to be able to highlight the racial differences or even racial similarities when we talk about religious freedom in that way. But I wanted you to maybe give us something that you feel with the racial issues of America and how it has affected religious and non-religious people. How would you describe the racial dynamic with your faith tradition, and
Yeah.
or anything that you've been involved with that comes from that, just from your parents or from race?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, I think about this a lot. I'm the race discourse officer for the Baha'is in the United States. So this is yeah. So anyway, I think one of the things that really stands out is, in addition, there's a historical commitment to the elimination of racism, as actually elevated to the level of spiritual law, sort of spiritual scripture in the Baha'i faith. I think connected to this idea of oneness and is this requirement, this imperative of the elimination of all forms of prejudice, including racial prejudice. But in the writings of the Baha'i faith, it doesn't really end there. Baha'u'llah, he once likened the Black race, the Black people, to the pupil of the eye, through which the light of the spirit shines forth. And that this idea that even though the pupil of the eye is Black, it is a fountain of light. And I think, he said this in the late 1800s when, racial genetics was like at its peak.
Right.
And, just the depth of sort of concerted dehumanization of Black people was so, had it just the height of its grip in many ways on the soul of humanity and the soul of white people. For Baha'u'llah, who was born in Iran, to elevate the station of an entire race of people that were degraded, systematically degraded, to me is just one of the most powerful things, and kind of brings me to tears when I think about it. And I think it speaks to the inherent nobility of Black people, to bring light to this world, and that without the elevation of Black people, there's no way humanity can advance. So that's one. And then I think from the earliest, earliest days of the American Baha'i community's existence in the late 1800s is when the faith entered the United States. Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah I mentioned before, was like focused in on this issue. He was a very joyful person, joyful from from his spirit, from his soul. And one of the few things that brought him sadness was when he thought about the divisions between Black and white in America. That was like a deep sadness for him. And again, this is a Persian man in his 70s who came to America. And before he came, he told the Baha'i community that they needed to have integrated meetings, even though it was illegal in many places in America. He felt that this principle was so important that it could not be compromised, and, that he would not visit the Baha'i community until they integrated their meetings. And then early on, he called for the American Baha'i community to host a race amity conference, an integrated meeting in Washington, D.C. in 1921. Ironically, on the same dates as the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Baha'i community was hosting an integrated race amity conference to promote racial unity. So I think, this principle, I say all that to say this principle of eliminating racism, not in theory, but in practice, was coming from the center of the Baha'i faith from the very beginning. And then I think, of course, the American Baha'i community, we're all Americans. To not be affected by racism is to be in a rainstorm and say, I'm not, and I don't, and not have an umbrella and say, I'm not wet. So everyone, of course, we know we all struggle with this, and the American Baha'i community is no exception. But I think what is powerful when I think about the American Baha'i community is not only do we have these principles and this exhortation to act on it, but that there's only one Baha'i community. And so we're striving to actually figure out what it means to be one community that isn't divided by race, that isn't divided by any social divisions. But of course we are, but the container of the community, the embrace of the community institutions is such that we have to figure it out together. And I can share a little bit more about what that looks like in practice, but I've been talking for a while, so I don't know if you want to ask another question or jump in.
No, that's good, PJ. And I'm allowing you to talk because I want people to fully understand. And this is voices, Black Faith Freedom. They've heard my voice. I want your voice to be amplified. I want the Baha'i voice to be amplified in that way. And so one of the questions I've asked everybody that has joined us the last couple of weeks is, what do you think that America can learn about faith freedom from minority faiths? And also, I think you've talked about it a little bit from the Bahai faith, but is there something that America needs to look toward to learn about faith freedom from minority faiths or minority religions?
Yeah, the principle that comes to mind in terms of what the Baha'i faith might contribute to this is unity and diversity. And I think that this is a fundamental principle of the Baha'i faith. And again, this idea of oneness is not to be understood as a monolithic unity, a monolithic oneness where we wash away everything that makes us, our richness. One of the things that makes us rich as a human race is our diversity. There's an analogy that Abdul Baha makes about a garden, and he basically says, how boring a garden that's all the same flower. What gives a garden its charm and beauty is the many different colors and smells that you have in that garden. And so he then uses that to say the same is true for the human race. And so one example of this in practice is what's called a Baha'i house of worship. So there's 7 continental Baha'i houses of worship around the world, 8 continental house of worship around the world. But now there's actually national and local houses of worship emerging. And they emerge out of Baha'i communities that are more advanced. And so some of the most advanced Baha'i communities that are having these local houses of worship and national ones are in Kenya and the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Cambodia, Papua New Guinea, India. Some of these places are producing the first local houses of worship. And what's so beautiful about the process is that this house of worship is a place where people of all faiths can come and pray and find rest. It's really just a place for the community to be in prayer and to be able to find opportunities for service in the community. And they're built. These local houses of worship are built by the people in the community. The design is done. The architect works with the local communities, often from the local community or from that country, to help reflect the cultural traditions and diversity of that place, the population that is being served by this house of worship. So it's a universal Baha'i institution that will manifest itself globally, but it reflects all of the diversity of the entire human race wherever it's built. When you look at them in their aggregate, and they're so beautiful to look at all the different houses of worship. So I think this idea of diversity is our richness, one of our heritages. Is something I think that we can contribute to this question of faith freedom. Is how do we recognize and honor the diversity and actually use it as a source of understanding ourselves better, understanding our own faiths better, practicing our own faiths better by understanding other faiths, not being guided by fear and prejudice. So yeah, I think this idea of unity and diversity is quite useful in this regard.
Yeah, PJ, I'm glad that you expressed that and also expressed the how diversity is an asset. We need to stop looking at diversity as not an asset. And your analogy of a garden is great. A beautiful garden has different colors, different flowers, different aromas, different smells, and picking up any of those or throwing out any of those doesn't elevate the garden, but it actually lessens or hurts the garden and hurts the garden's beauty. And so religious freedom, I would love for it to be that way, that all of us in America here have that, and we're a part of that garden, and it's okay for us to plant. And I think the weeds would be when we don't allow and protect those different flowers or things in the garden. That would be the weed, in that. And so I just want to thank you for joining us for this week. I'm glad you could cap us off at the end to just bring that unity and that oneness together.
Yeah.
That principle. I didn't know why I wanted you to end it for us, but this is exactly why, I think, because just your faith tradition wants to bring that oneness, and as a part of the religious freedom. I was thinking of the church I used to go to in Atlanta. I don't exactly agree with everything they do anymore, but the pastor used to say, "Love seeks to understand and not be understood."
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I always brought that from that, even though, and that's just a part of religious freedom, because I
Yeah.
don't have to go to that place anymore, but I can still take something from it. And
Yeah.
I hope people that have watched today have learned something not only about the Baha'i faith, but also about just how race is still a part of the conversation and has to be and should be a part of the conversation for us to grow. So I want to say
Definitely.
thank you again, PJ. Know we're going to see each other again soon with
Definitely.
with the work that you've been doing, and thank everybody that has joined us for this series. BJC will be doing more voices series with other traditions and other minorities, and also just other faith voices, so that we can amplify religious freedom and faith freedom for all. This episode will be on our YouTube channel, just like the previous one. So if you missed any of them, you can just go to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media as we put out different medium pieces and different follow-ups from this. But thank you for joining us this time. And PJ, to the next time we see each other, be blessed.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.